Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you in cyberspace. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm sure we'll get to know each other a lot more during the semester. My name is Mohini. Uh, Please feel free to address me as such in emails. Um, I've just started lecturing economics micro. I have quite a solid background. I have a master's levels economics. I am here to answer any questions you have. I'm not sure if you guys have already covered the learning units. Can you give me an indication of more or less where you are? You can open your mics and please feel free to chat to me because there's only 6 of us in the room. So it should be quite easy. Would you guys like me to just give you an overview of learning unit 1 and 2? Or would you like me to answer specific questions that you guys have?
Hi, Mohini. How are you?
Very well, thanks. And yourself?
I'm good, thank you. I think an overview would be nice just to start off. I just received my book, so I haven't really covered anything as such as yet, but I will be getting into it.
No problem, Jolene. Thank you so much. I will absolutely do that. Okay, so I have yet to be given access to your ARC site, but as soon as I do, I'll upload as many additional resources as I can. I do have summaries of each of the learning units you need to cover. And then what I'll try to do in this session is I will give you guys an overview if you require. Otherwise, I will put a form or a link to a form in our module on ARC. And then if you have any questions that arise during the week, you can just pop them in there. And then I will prepare my lecture around that, around the questions you guys have. Okay, so let's just start here with the basic concepts. Okay, so what is economics? Okay, and why is it so relevant? So it's essentially economics is, if you look at the root words, it's essentially all about household management. So we actually split economics into obviously 2 sections. We have micro and we've got macroeconomics. We do microeconomics in first semester, and in second semester we focus on macro. Now, the difference between those two is a very easy multiple choice question. So I've just tabulated the results for you. Here we can obviously see that microeconomics, obviously micro meaning small. So we're concerned with the decision making of individuals, how they spend their income and how they, sell their goods and services, as well as how they provide their factors of production to the market. So with microeconomics, we're concerned with individual households and businesses. With macroeconomics, we're concerned more with how the country makes decisions. So that's when we'll incorporate aspects such as like how government makes their policies, etc. Okay, but for now, the most important thing to understand is simply that in microeconomics, we're only concerned with individual incomes, households, and businesses. Okay, please, guys, stop me at any point if you have any questions. Okay, so we're concerned with individuals and most importantly, their purchasing power. Obviously, you guys know that purchasing power is what moves the market. Okay, so this is a perfect description of our economic problem. Do you guys see a problem with this picture? How would you describe this problem?
Hi, I would describe it as a lot of people fighting for one slice of pizza.
Exactly. Genius. Okay, so exactly that. We've got one slice of pizza and lots of hands trying to get to it. Okay, so this picture describes the problem of scarcity. So, what we have, the essential economic problem, and the reason that it's so important to study it is that we have unlimited wants as people, right? Is there any limit to how much money you could spend? Probably not. So we have unlimited wants, but we only have very limited resources which to fulfill those wants. And obviously, everybody in the economy wants different things. Okay. So in this scenario, what do you think happens to the price of this pizza?
The price of the pizza will increase because of the high demand.
Beautiful.
Translated.
Exactly that. Okay, so the price of the pizza goes up because of the scarcity. Okay, so the only solution to this problem is either to increase the price, or can you think of anything else we could do?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I don't mean to put you guys on the spot. If you prefer, I'll just go, but please feel free to interject. So, the biggest problem here is obviously we've only got one slice of pizza, three people. So, if we cannot increase the price of pizza to reduce the demand, the only thing, other thing we could do is to produce more pizza. How do we do that? Okay, we have factors of production. So, within our economy, our individuals, okay, we will get into different economic systems, which is essentially based on who owns these factors of production. But in a typical market economy, you would see that the individuals, the people in the population are the ones who own the factors of production. Those factors of production are these four things. It's land, labor, entrepreneurship, and capital. Okay, if you get asked in a test to classify those four things, land falls under natural resources, labor and entrepreneurship fall under human resources, and capital is obviously man made resources. So, capital in this sense is machinery, things that we create. It's also investment capital. So, actual money we put into the market or into a business. Okay, so it's quite clear that not all goods and services are equal. Obviously, if you have billions to spend, then buying a G6 is within your spectrum of possibility. But if you are struggling to make ends meet, all you really want to do is be able to feed your family, right? We know that from Maslow's hierarchy. You would start with the most important needs, okay? Can you survive? Are you safe? Then you'd be concerned with, do you have love and companionship? Then how do you build self-esteem and finally self-actualization? Now, obviously, for a lot of people, being able to buy a G6 airplane would be self-actualizing. Okay, so essentially, what Maslow's hierarchy was teaching us is how we use our resources that we have available as individuals. Okay, so not all goods and services are equal. Depending on, I always tell my students, I'm like, so you have 100 problems at the moment. But as soon as you're hungry, how many problems do you have? Just the one. Why? Because all of the other problems are not nearly as important as your survival. So your hunger overwhelms your need to study, for example, okay? Because studying is a form of self-actualization. It's just a way to sort of visualize what you're trying to do as an economist. You're trying to say, I have an X amount of resources available in my economy. How do I satisfy the biggest portion of the population possible? Okay. So obviously we're more concerned about feeding everyone than we are about, self-actualization things, okay, which is why it's so important. Most countries try to alleviate poverty before they try to provide free tertiary education or free electronic cars. Okay. Okay. So each item on the left in the pink or purple box has a certain value, okay? And each unit on the right-hand side in the blue box has a particular value to you as well. So let's say that everything in the blue box is represented by entertainment of some form, and everything on the left-hand side is a more essential need, so like some form of food, okay? Now you as a person only have 100 units, okay? So you have to split it between the two. How would you allocate it? Okay, so the most important thing to note there is that for every unit of food you sacrifice, you gain 1 unit of entertainment. Okay. You only have 100 units and you want to get the most satisfaction for your money. This is where we hit something very important called opportunity cost. So for every unit or for every 10 Rand or 100 Rand you spent on entertainment, that is now causing a loss to you in the form of food. Okay, so you as a person, as an individual, especially in microeconomics, we're always concerned with maximizing or optimizing our resource allocation and getting the most out of it. So with what marginal opportunity cost or what opportunity cost tells you is what your decision has cost you in the form of the nearest foregone option. Okay, so if you choose food, you are sacrificing your entertainment. If you choose entertainment, how much food are you sacrificing? We'll look at this idea in a little bit more detail. So the thing that we use to illustrate this idea is called the PPF, okay? It's the productions possibility curve. So I don't know, it's not particularly clear, but I will explain it and hopefully it'll become a little bit clearer to you guys. Okay, so this curve demonstrates to us what this country uses its productive capacity on. Okay, so in this economy, it looks like it's probably America, okay? I say that because we only produce 2 things in this economy. For a productive possibility curve, you only are analyzing 2 products, okay? So what the curve illustrates, okay, from A to F, is the total production capabilities of your country. This is everything we can afford to produce. Okay, so like I said with the food and the entertainment, us as individuals, as people who are willing to spend their income in the market, this is how we make our vote on where on this curve we as a country produce. So, for example, if we all decide that what we really want in life are computers, that's what's going to push us forward. That means within our economy, if we produce 0 movies, we can produce 25,000 computers. Okay, that is the full extent of our production capacity within our country. If, however, we decide instead that we want 5 movies, that would push us to expend all of our production capacity on movies and none on computers, which would mean that we would produce no computers, but 500 movies. Okay. So anywhere along this curve is an efficient allocation of resources, because this curve shows us if we efficiently allocate all of our resources that are available in our economy, anywhere, whether we decide to produce all computers or all movies or some combination of the two goods, we will still be efficient. If, however, we are producing at point I over here, within the curve, where it stays here, what we are doing is we are operating at an inefficient level. Okay, so that means that we have people who are willing to work. We have the capital available. We've got the land that we need. We've got the entrepreneurs that we need, but we are still not producing at an efficient level. Okay. Now, it's important to note for the test purposes that if you move from any position of inefficiency to efficiency, you are sacrificing nothing. Okay. You are only gaining you're gaining back your production capacity. You are operating at the full limits of your production possibility curve. Everybody in your economy is employed. If you are operating at point I, you have people who are under or unemployed. Okay. This is currently where South Africa is operating. Okay. Now, if you want to, so what they will ask you typically in a test is to calculate the opportunity cost of moving from point B to point E. Okay. What they are asking you there is at point B, we are currently producing, shall we say, about 24,000 computers and only 100 movies. Okay. In order for us to be able to produce at point E, that's where we're producing, say, 12,000 computers and 400 movies. What that means is we would have to sacrifice, let's see, from 24,000 down to 12,000. So we are sacrificing 12,000 computers to gain 300 movies. Okay. So it's important to understand the PPC. I understand the graph gets a bit tricky. So if you guys want me to spend a little bit more time on that, either now or later, it's not a problem at all. I know the graphs are always a sticking point. The theory you should be able to get through quite quickly. It's mostly just so far for Learning Unit 1, just about the 3 themes. We've covered 2 of them already. The first one is about what is economics, what the differences between macro and micro, what is scarcity, how would you describe it, what is opportunity cost, and how is that depicted in the production possibility curve. Okay, so we've already covered 3. The last theme in this learning unit is stocks and flows, and we will cover that shortly. Okay, so if we go back to our graph, here, point J, okay, this is what we call an unattainable point. Why? The production possibility curve already shows you the maximum products or combination of products that you can produce within your economy, which makes point J unattainable or impossible. Okay. They will possibly ask you calculations on how these curves sort of move or how you move along the curve. If they're asking you how you move along the curve, they are asking you to calculate the opportunity cost of one product for another. You will notice that in this curve, there is no monetary value and there is no time associated with this production capacity, which means it is specifically all incorporated into the resources. So you are simply saying 25, or let's use an easier one. At point C, 200 movies, I can produce 200 movies and 22,000 computers. If I decide to produce 300 movies, it's going to cost me about between 4,000 and 5,000 computers. I never talk about the cost of the computers or the movies, never refer to how long it takes to make either of them. We're simply concerned with what is the production possibilities within your economy based on the resources you have available. Okay. So what could possibly expand this curve? How do we produce more without, creating new people for labor or entrepreneurship, or colonizing a new country to get more land? How do we expand our production possibility curve? Okay. To answer that question, do any of you use AI?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. Do you use it often?
And not too often.
Not just every now and then. Are you guys working? Do you use it for work, or is it just for submissions?
I use it for submissions or research purposes.
Love that. Okay, so have you heard of, obviously you've heard of ChatGPT. Have you heard of DeepSeek before, anybody?
Yes, I have. I use
Oh,
DeepSeek
oh,
currently.
yes. It's wonderful, isn't it? Okay,
It's
so
very-
I'm going to show you very quickly what can happen and why economics is relevant. Okay, so this is just going to be a quick aside, but hopefully it's I want you to be able to see how these economics principles are actually very valuable to you in real life on just a daily basis. Okay, so when ChatGPT was launched by OpenAI, that was in November 2022. You can see that originally their company was worth under $1 billion. They got like R1 million injection to create this open source AI code. As soon as it was launched, its valuation jumped to 20 billion. Okay, now that's not a long period of time to invest in to get such a massive return. Just a few short months later, they had added nearly 10 billion to their valuation. Obviously, what this does is attract competition. Because obviously, if a company can do it with such scarce resources, they could produce something that was worth $20 billion. Obviously, everybody wants to get into the game. So let's see what happens to our charts here. Okay, so we now know that OpenAI had found something special. Okay, they had created the first AI, the first large language model. Everybody was very excited about it. Okay, then DeepSeek was founded in July 2023. They just released it. Okay, DeepSeek is obviously the main competition for ChatGPT, Microsoft. Can you guys see where DeepSeek was released? Look at the impact from December 2024 that it had on Microsoft's share price. Okay. In real life, in real terms, what was happening was that people were now reallocating resources out of Microsoft, away from OpenAI and into DeepSeek. Okay. So these are massive corporations, massive countries, whole countries, that were shifting production capabilities from one AI to another. Okay, they had two products, and in real time, this is what it looks like on the market. Okay, obviously, this was a very difficult thing to anticipate if I've got any traders out there, but it is still, this was like a black swan event. No one expected OpenAI to encounter any real competition for years. Okay. What did DeepSeek do to the PPF curve? Okay, so let me just make this size a little bit more reasonable. So this is what happened in real time with DeepSeek. So if we just, okay, so if we consider consumer goods to be ChatGPT, and we say that DeepSeek is now capital goods, what has happened is that DeepSeek is considerably cheaper to train. So technology improves our production possibility curves, increased efficiency, and nothing increases your efficiency like technology. Okay, obviously you guys have seen we used to mine things with our hands. Then we went through the Iron Age where we improved our tools. Then we went through, the smelting age. Then we started using steam, then electricity. Every major advancement in humankind has been driven by technological advancement. And technology is the one beautiful thing that improves and gets cheaper. Okay, nothing works like it. If you take anything from this course, please, not this course, but this lecture, please remember that it is such a valuable piece of information. So what happened was, originally, there was no DeepSeek. Okay, so we were operating at point A. All of the resources were going into ChatGPT. It was a consumer favorite. They had 1 million users within the first month. Everybody loved it. And this is what they were able to produce. But as soon as competition entered the market, DeepSeek went from point B, right, having very few people being attracted to it because we didn't know it existed, so we didn't know what it could do or how much it cost. But as soon as they released the information, we had a shift in the curve. Okay. Now, shifts in the curve only happen when you are moving from a point that would have been inefficient. If you look at point X, okay, if we are now have the production capacity of A to C, curve A to C, and we are still operating at point X on the original curve A to B, we are now operating at an inefficient level. So that means that by moving from X to Y, we are gaining efficiency, which means there was no opportunity cost, nothing really lost. All that happens is we gained efficiency. Okay, how did we gain efficiency? Well, let me show you. So what happened was, now what's happening is that on this curve from A to C, you'll see the literal movement between industries, between countries, of resources moving from point A, where it was all ChatGPT all the time, to closer to point Y, and potentially even, because obviously DeepSeek's just come out and it's made such a big splash, people now prefer it. We may move all the way down to point C, in which case it would be the end of OpenAI. Why? Because we would now choose to move all of our resources as individuals, as businesses, to point C, where we are producing all DeepSeek all the time and zero ChatGPT. Okay. So now we're going to cover another aspect of how economists sometimes get things wrong. Okay, so it is so important for us to be able to apply economics principles to real life. The reason that it's so important is because very often the narratives that we're sort of fed through the media and, through other people, word of mouth and social media, all of this noise, it doesn't really tell us what's really happening. Okay, so you'll find that in the media, what you get is a lot of normative statements. Okay, so normative statements, I think you can sort of relate the normative to narrative. Okay, so how does it fit the narrative? Is it opinion based? Then it is narrative based, in which case it is a normative statement. So let's look at how the media reported this new advancement. Okay. So CNN came out and it said it was giving the world a view into Chinese censorship. DeepSeek hasn't actually disrupted the AI players. There's a shocking AI advancement. They were like, how did they do it? NVIDIA lost nearly 600 billion in one day. That is the literal shift of resources happening in the real world. Here, US lawmakers plan to ban DeepSeek. It's all quite negative. They're implying that there's a lot of censorship about it. It's not actually the disruption that we think it is. MSN reported that the app was impressively strange. Okay, what was the fuss about? Forbes was warning about DeepSeek. The very interesting thing, just also another aside, was that DeepSeek, for the first month it was created, had imposter syndrome. So when you asked it what AI model it was, it used to say that it was ChatGPT because they used ChatGPT to train DeepSeek. Okay, and in doing so, look what they managed to do. The people voted with their money. How did we take to it as individuals? When you look at things like YouTube, where you're getting more of a sense of how the people are reacting and not how the institutions or the countries are reacting. So here we have, what is DeepSeek? Here's a beginner's guide in 2 minutes. How I made thousands with DeepSeek, a comprehensive guide. This is not a narrative, that's coming from the people of fear. There's no concern about censorship. They're like, this is how to use it. Okay, so why did they take to it so aggressively? One simple reason. It was cheaper. DeepSeek was 16 to 33 times cheaper to train than the original ChatGPT. It is more effective. It is more cost effective. The free version is significantly better, and their subscriptions are much cheaper. So what they did to the market was they shifted the curve. Okay. And the market and money always follows efficiency. So again, technology gets better, but it also gets cheaper. Okay. So we do obviously sometimes get it wrong. I'll just give you a little bit of an economics history lesson just for 2 minutes. I promise I won't deviate for too long. So sorry, before I actually move on. The reason that I also bring up this beautiful little image is that the reason that we were quite concerned about how fast OpenAI was growing is that it was almost attracting a bubble. So they created a moat around this AI and they thought that no one could penetrate it. Okay, so that meant that because they were the only people that were able to create this product, they had a monopoly of the market. So they could charge us what they wanted, they could restrict access, they could make it, they could censor things, they could do all sorts of stuff. But it was all driven by narrative because we didn't actually know anything about this technology. Okay, we're learning, but it's still very new. So what we could look at is the past. How have we reacted in similar situations? Okay, so I want to refer back to the tulip mania. Okay, so this happened in 1634 to 1637. This is where pretty much the original bubble, the financial bubble. So what happened was people started valuing tulips in this beautiful, Holland Island. But it sort of got to a point of craziness. People started being irrational about it. So the price of tulips started to rise, but not to any reasonable level. The price of tulips rose 3,000% for no imaginable reason. Okay. With NVIDIA, we saw very much the same thing. Okay. How did we know this was similar? Do you see the pattern? When we base a decision or a statement on facts, things that we can prove, they are called positive statements. Okay, you guys will do research in your third year where we'll cover different types of research methodology. Positivity is very quantitative. It is mostly based on numbers. It is based in facts, things that you can prove. So in economics, you get two types of statements, either normative or positive. Okay. And often the way to determine what you're looking at is to look at the facts. This looks like astronomical growth. Is it justified? Well, we don't know much about the technology, but when have we seen something like this before? All the way back in 1634. And we've already seen what the introduction of some common sense and some competition does to this market. For the record, this was the top for NVIDIA, and since then, it has done nothing but fall. Okay. Why? So we moved from Microsoft to NVIDIA. Why? Because the entire market was not just based on ChatGPT. It was also based on the fact that the capital in their factor of production, the capital, the man-made element were the microchips, and they were only being produced by NVIDIA. Okay. They also restricted any NVIDIA chips from going overseas. So the reason that DeepSeek was so efficient at training was literally because they didn't have access to all the processing power. So they had to be more efficient with what they had. Okay. So they moved from a point of inefficiency that the other market hadn't realized to a point of efficiency. And in that whole process, they actually extended the possibility curve of the entire market simply by using their money more efficiently. Okay. Here is again just more evidence, because obviously we're looking now at normative versus positive. Here is more positive or factual basis for the fact that look at the money. This is an index that measures the flow of money into the Chinese economy, specifically in tech. And look what it's done recently. Okay. People will move to the most efficient use of their resources. We call this smart money, okay? In economics, that is how we allocate our resources. Okay, now let me just go stop sharing. Go. So now, okay, I know I've given you guys quite a bit to chew on. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the learning objectives for this unit, and we can just make sure we've covered everything. Okay. How do we define economics? We can define economics in obviously two ways. It is about how households are managed, households, and businesses as individuals, specifically for microeconomics. But the biggest economics problem is we have unlimited wants and scarce resources to fulfill them. Can you explain why economics is a social science? Economics is about people and individuals and businesses, and we make up, even those organizations are all made up of human capital. So that's why economics is a social science. We look at how people spend their money, how they earn their income, and why they make the decisions they make. Microeconomics, again, is about the individuals and their businesses. Households and businesses are the only two market participants we have at this point. Macroeconomics involves international trade, governments. It's how we look at our national interest. Positive statements are based on facts. They are supported by numbers. They are not simply opinions. Okay. Normative statements, however, are opinion-based. So if someone was to come to you and say that, for example, unemployment is a bigger problem in our country than inflation, absolutely you could make the argument that unemployment is a bigger problem than inflation, but I'm pretty sure that would change from person to person. If you're employed, unemployment is less of a problem for you than inflation. Okay. So because even though we know that those statements, both unemployment and inflation are not great for consumers or the economy, we know those two things in isolation are true. But saying that one is worse than the other without any supporting facts is a normative statement. It is simply a narrative until you can prove it. Okay. We explain the concept of scarcity, the resources we have in our economy, the choices we have to make with the resources we have available, and how our opportunity cost, how much we have to sacrifice of one good in our economy to produce another with the aid of the production possibilities curve. Okay. We've also looked at the production possibilities curve, how we distinguish between an efficient use of our resources that means that we are operating on the curve. So any point on the actual production possibilities curve, or inefficient, which means that we are at any point within the curve. Okay, any point towards the origin on the inside of the curve is inefficient, and any point outside of the curve, anywhere in your first quadrant, but on the outside of the shaded area of your graph, is an unattainable combination. Okay. We know also how we can illustrate the production possibility, or we can use the production possibility curve to illustrate improvements in the use of resources, or for that matter, an increase in the quantity of resources. Okay. The same thing would happen to your curve. So if we are gaining efficiency, we're moving from a point within the curve to a point on the curve. If we're operating on the curve, we are making the decision between a combination of two goods. How much do we produce of each? Okay. If we have an increase or an improvement in technology, it actually shifts the curve. Why? Because we are no longer having to compromise on how much ChatGPT versus how much DeepSeek we have. We have now overwhelmingly being able to use exactly the same number of resources. We can produce far more users for DeepSeek. Why? Because we can produce those server farms at a far lower cost. So it's extended the curve. It has shifted the curve outwards to the right. Okay. Can we apply critical reasoning to correlation and causation? So when we were looking at the actual charts of those companies, we have to look at, is there a correlation? So when we were looking at the tulip mania, for example, we simply have correlation. It happened then, it happened now. Okay. It doesn't mean the one is causing the other. What we did find when we looked at why these things were so impossible was because we couldn't actually figure out why the tulip was valued so highly. And here again, we couldn't really figure out what the value of the AI is. Okay, so give you a completely simple example. If you drink tea on your way home and you have an accident, that is correlation. You drank tea and you had an accident. Causation is where you say, I had an accident because I drank tea. Okay. Now, obviously, there are some things that you can drink where that would be relevant. But in this case, it is simply correlation. You drinking tea does not increase your risk of accidents. Okay. We will look at levels and rate of change. I like to do a maths-based course when you guys have covered a little bit more of the production possibilities, because here we're actually going to look at gradient and how the curves actually shift. So I actually find this is more relevant to learning unit 3 when we look at demand and supply. Okay, we have just a few minutes. We've got 15 minutes left. Okay, what I will do for you guys is I will add in some lecturer resources. Okay, just a few activities which cover some of the things that are not highlighted in the textbook or not highlighted specifically in this ARC site, but may come up as like general knowledge in your tests. So this is just simply how to sort goods and services, and I've given you a specific reference to look at in your textbook. It's on page 7, and then here just a little activity to reinforce your learning. Okay, you will find something similar. I will add this into your modules as soon as I get access, and then we can go over it in our following lecture. Okay. Do you guys have any questions about what we've covered so far?
Nothing on my side.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I know that we have actually started, I think, at least a week or so behind. So what I want to try and do is I'm going to try and cover Learning Unit 2. Even if I just cover the basics, you can see this is quite a bit shorter, just so that when you do cover it by yourself in this week, that you have something to refer back to. Okay, we will obviously go through this again, so please don't feel under pressure. Our test is on the 25th of, your assignment I think is due on the 25th of March, but we will have ample time to cover all the maths and do plenty of practice to make sure you guys are comfortable before we get there. Okay, so very quickly, this learning unit is about economic systems and flows. Okay, so today we're going to cover these 6 learning objectives. Okay, so here we have, please excuse, I did have these AI generated pictures, which I thought were very cool, but it doesn't do particularly well with the text versions. But the most important thing is, in economics, we have 3 questions. What products to produce, how to produce those products, and who to produce those products for. Now, the economic system, which helps us determine the answers to those 3 questions, are these 4 systems. Let me just expand this so we can see it all together. Okay. So the economic systems that we have to choose from it as human beings are the traditional economy. Now, that is obviously the oldest version of an economy that is based on traditions. It is a bartering system. There's no real money that comes into play. It's based on customs, traditions, and beliefs. Okay. Then we have the command economy. This is where the government makes all the economic decisions. The reason they have the power to do that is because they own all the factors of production. A typical example is North Korea. So when I think it's Kim Jong-un, when he decides that they are going to start producing, say, all weaponry in North Korea, he makes the decision and everybody adjusts the production curve to meet that necessity or requirement from government. A market economy is the exact opposite. In a market economy, the people, the individuals are the ones that own the factors of production, and they sell those factors of production to businesses. Okay. A typical example of that is the United States. Okay, so individuals and businesses pretty much have the majority of the power there. Obviously, it's been shifting recently, but the majority of the power is still invested in the individuals and businesses. South Africa and most modern economies use a mixed economy. Okay, so we have a combination of both market and command economies. So while we still have aspects of a free market where you can start a business and you can, use your factors of production or sell your factors of production to any business willing to buy it, we still have a lot of regulation that determines so for example, you can't agree necessarily to work for 10 Rand because in our country we have a minimum wage rate. So there's a lot of regulation that sort of moves us a little bit closer to a command economy. Obviously, not quite to the extent that we don't own anything as individuals in the country, but we are still a mixed economy because government does own and make certain decisions for its people and individuals within their population. Okay, so as a reward for our factors of production, so obviously this is in a market economy where the individuals, the people, you and I, are the ones that own the 4 factors of production. How does a business get us to provide those factors of production? They pay us for it. For our land, they pay us rent. For labor, they pay us wages and salaries. For our capital, and remember, capital is in the form of either capital investment or in the form of capital in the form of machinery and man-made objects. We are provided with interest. Entrepreneurs are rewarded with profits. How our economy operates in a micro environment, please remember that you can keep it in the back of your mind. It's not really pertinent to this discussion, but in macro, we will have more market participants. But for micro, we are mostly only concerned with households and firms. Government does play a role, but is predominantly households and firms. The reason that we incorporate government is because it depends on, obviously, your economy, your market economy, and which structure you've chosen. We have 2 main markets within this economy. Okay, so households do not just go directly to businesses and say, hey, I have some land I'd like to rent to you. They provide all of those factors of production that they own: labor, land, capital, and entrepreneurial capabilities to the factor market. Businesses then go to the factor market, pay the costs, and hire the households. In return, they get paid income in the form of wages, rents, interest, and profits. The households then take that income and spend that money on products and services that they buy from the product market, okay, or the goods market. And they, in return for their consumption of their goods and services, they obviously pay away the income that they have received in return for their factors of production. So we then pay the factor market, the product market, and that becomes revenue for the businesses. The businesses, then you can see how the cycle continues. The businesses then use that revenue to hire or include into their productive capacity more factors from the market. And they pay more, and therefore households have more consumption spending. And so we have a flow of the economy where simply the major flows are how we spend our money, how we incur our income, and how we create production within our economy. So it's only 3 things: income, production, and spending. we have two markets, again, just to reinforce the idea. In this market, we are selling mostly goods and services. We're doing natural resources that are going to be, still further produced or further refined into something, more. Okay. The factor market here, this is where we provide our labor, our entrepreneurship, our capital, and our land. Okay. The last thing we need to cover with the last 6 minutes that we have are stock and flow variables. Okay, again, students often struggle to determine what this means, but the examples are quite self-explanatory. So a stock variable is measured at one specific time. So when they ask you in a multiple choice question, which of these four things, for example, is a stock variable, look for the thing that doesn't change. So for example, if they are asking you for investment, production for 1 month, or the amount of money that's coming in and out of your account, okay, investment, that doesn't necessarily change. You're looking at the number of staff members you have, the number of the amount of production capacity you have in a month. Those things are a specific thing. Your wealth, your inventory, things that are like physical. You have them locked away somewhere in a vault or in a room. Okay, those are stock variables. They can measure at one specific time. Flow variables are a lot more difficult to measure. Why? Because they're continuously changing. Okay, so think about your bank account. Money comes in the form of income and leaves in the form of expenditure. Okay, you have an idea of how much money is in your account, but to the exact cent, okay. So that's why that is a flow variable. GDP is a flow variable because in our economy, we have flows. So in order for us to figure out how much gross domestic product, how much do we produce as an economy, we would have to measure these different flows. We can't say at any one point that this is where we're going to measure GDP or this is where we're going to measure GDP because it's constantly changing. Okay, so it's a flow variable. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop there. Does anybody have any questions in the last 3 minutes?
Yes, I do. The first assignment on the ARC, it shows that it's due on the 13th of March. Is that correct? Or because you mentioned 24th of March?
Oh goodness. I apologize, Jolene. Yes, it probably is the 13th of March. I haven't received the updated or rather the online timetable. So I am working on the campus timetable. So yes, very possibly the 13th, in which case next week, what I will do for us this week is as soon as I get access to the ARC site, I will create a little form for you guys so that as you go through your work, you can submit questions, and I will specifically focus on those questions in the next lecture. If I don't get access to the ARC site on time, I will send you an email. Oh, of course, yes, of course. I will also send you an email so that and here is my email address as well. But I will send you an email with a link to the form for any questions that you guys have as you are working through the assignment as well. Okay. Otherwise, I am available. I will try and get back to you as quickly as possible because I understand that a quick response when the deadline is so tight will be very useful. Where do we find the assignment? Dear Vault, I will have to check for you. As far as I know, it would most likely be on the ARC website. If you are looking at the learning units, let me just share my screen again. So if we just leave here.
I found it under student materials.
Student material. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, and then also I think they will also be populating the majority of your information over here in formative 1 and 2. But in case it isn't updated, yes, student materials is always the place to find the most up-to-date information, as well as your PAS for your assignments. But yeah, okay, so let me just check. Are there any other questions? If you guys struggle at any point, please just let me know. And we will have a few days before your actual submission to go through any questions that you have. Okay, guys, if there are no other questions, where's the next collab? It'll be next week, Tuesday, same time, same link. See what I did there? Apologies.
I got it.
Thank you so much. Okay, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat to me. Have a wonderful evening. And again, I'm always available for any questions. If I can't, if it's outside of the scope of what you want to cover for the actual learning units, I'll just send you a quick response email as quickly as I can. But have a lovely evening and thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Hi.